He's a governor who hates activists. He's a teenager who forgot his wallet. Their chance encounter changed everything, until a terrifying name surfaced. You're the son of my worst enemy. But it was too late to help. A leaked, scandalous video exploded across Florida. His wife is in a coma. His career is crumbling. His choice, power or conscience. A rebel father versus a tyrant governor. Between them, a boy who believes they're still human. "You sold out," screamed the activist, clutching a knife. But the truth was worse. Secret payments, fake letters, betrayed friends. Who'll win this war? One press conference. Two fathers. Tears that shook the world. They hated each other. Until they knew what it meant to lose everything. Stay tuned to discover how tears, rage, and a child's drawing upended Florida's politics. And don't forget to subscribe. The ending will shock you. Orlando simmered in August heat, even dusk refusing relief, the air thick as syrup, redolent of asphalt and citrus groves. Ron DeSantis shrugged off his suit jacket onto the limo's back seat and motioned to the driver, "Wait 5 minutes." He needed a walk, 5 minutes free of security, protocol, the press. His bare feet in Oxfords throbbed from endless meetings, his throat metallic, like the aftertaste of a long flight. Sunrise Diner nestled between a pawn shop and a pharmacy, its neon sign flickering pink, sheepish in its wear. Ron pushed open the door, the jingle of a bell merging with a waitress's drawl, "Sit anywhere, honey." He chose a window booth where, as a student, he'd once crammed for exams. Now it smelled of fried bacon and generic coffee. First thought, why am I here? Second, because there are no cameras. His gaze fixed on a teenager at the counter, 17 maybe, in a rumpled hoodie, frantically digging through pockets. "Where's that damn wallet?" he muttered, counting change. Ron recognized the gesture, fingers clutching air instead of dollars, eyes fixed on the floor as if it might swallow him. Like he'd stood in a campus lobby, stipend delayed, $3 left until payday. "Hey," he raised his hand, catching the waitress's eye. "His order's on me." The teen whipped around, wide brown eyes, freckles, a lip bitten raw, stress, panic. Ron thought of how his wife, Casey, taught teens to spot such signs. "No," the boy mumbled. "I forgot my card at home. Means today's my day to be a good Samaritan." Ron smiled, gesturing for him to join. "2 burgers and fries, Doris," he called, catching the waitress's name tag. The teen hesitated, then scraped a chair. His sneakers were splattered with paint, like Miami Beach graffiti kids. "Jake," he muttered. "Ron, you look like that one politician." "Always said I've got a B-list actor's face," Ron joked, pushing a water glass aside. "Let him think I'm just Ron." Doris dropped the food, tossing the check onto the table. Jake ate ravenously, as if he hadn't eaten in days. Ron watched him pick at a Chipotle crack in the Formica, a nervous tick. "Your parents know you're out here?" he asked, crunching fries. "Dad's always on the road, fighting for justice," Jake snorted, bitterness lacing the words. "Mom's sick. Diabetes. Insulin keeps getting pricier." Ron froze. Insulin. He'd signed a price regulation bill a week ago. 15% reduction, a win for Florida families, his tweet had read. 15% of $1,000 was still too much for a kid like Jake. "Sorry," he mumbled, surprised at the words. "For what?" "You're not a pharma CEO," Jake huffed, then choked on cola. Ron thumped his back, feeling the scapulas under thin hoodie fabric, malnutrition, stress, all the signs. "Hey, man," Jake pulled away, blushing. "I'm not a kid." "Got 3 of my own," Ron said, pulling his phone. Madison, waving from a swing, snapped the screen. 12-year-old daughter, but I still sprint to check she doesn't fall." Jake laughed and the diner brightened. "Your wife must be saintly." "Oh, Casey's a saint. Last month I forgot our anniversary. She bought me a cake, with 'Thank God you're not a senator' written on it." They talked for half an hour. Jake rambled about school, his sister's dream to become a vet, his gig as a courier. Ron nodded, but his mind spun with stats, minimum wage, housing costs, child poverty rates. "We cut taxes, but..." When Jake reached for the check, Ron stopped him. "I said it's on me." "But..." "No buts. You'll come back someday and pay it forward. Chain of kindness, you know? Jake hesitated, fishing a crumpled paper from his pocket. Here's my number. If you ever need help, I fix bikes, deliver groceries. Ron took the slip, his hands trembling unnoticed. When was the last time someone offered help like that? Thanks, Jake. He exited the diner, pocketing the receipt. The driver opened the limo door, but Ron turned. Jake was waving from the window, his gesture echoing his daughter's awkward warmth. In the car, he unfolded the receipt. Scrawled on the back in child's handwriting, "Thank you, Mr. Ron. You're not like you are on TV." Ron chuckled, but the laugh died in his throat. He pressed a hand to his face, recalling Jake's words about his father, fighting for justice. What if this man was one of the radicals and chaos mongers he'd publicly scorned? "Sir?" The driver winced. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," Ron wiped his eyes. "Just dust." He reached for his phone, hesitating before typing, "Mark Torres, activist, Florida. Tomorrow." Today, he wanted to believe he'd helped a person, not a symbol. Back at the diner, Jake stared at the limo's taillights. Whispering to the empty room, he said, "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't tell him who you are, but he's different." Ron's limo burst from the alley, trailing a cloud of dust mingled with the scent of fried onions from the diner's ventilation. The governor clutched the crumpled receipt, no longer a bill for 2 burgers, but a clue pressed to his chest. The phrase, "You're not like you are on TV," pulsed in his mind. He closed his eyes, replaying Jake's laughter through his bitten lip, his nervous fingers tracing the hoodie's hem. "Children see the truth," Casey would say, when Madison at 5 had declared the governor on screen looked like an angry robot. "Sir," the driver's voice interrupted his thoughts. "You have an 8-hour budget meeting scheduled. Immediately." Ron checked his watch. 7:45 p.m. Damn it. He'd spent nearly an hour with Jake, an eternity for a chance encounter. Turn on the siren. The car surged forward, slicing through evening traffic. Ron scrolled through documents, but numbers blurred. 2.3 million for school breakfast programs, 4.8 million for pharmacy subsidy. How many families like Jake slipped through the cracks? He recoiled in the leather seat, remembering Jake's words about insulin. What if his mother dies from my victory of his phone buzzed? A message from his press secretary. Urgent. Mark Torres launched #HungryState, protesting outside our office, awaiting instructions. Ron clenched his jaw. Torres, his personal nightmare. The man who'd called him a political madman obsessed with control at debates. This same Torres had protested outside Ron's daughter's hospital a month ago during her pneumonia stay. "Your policies are killing our kids," he'd screamed into a megaphone until security dragged him away in cuffs. "Change route," Ron snapped, "head to the office." He didn't notice the receipt slipping from his pocket, stuck to his shoe, as fate prepared its trap. Meanwhile, Jake trudged along 5th Avenue, hands deep in pockets. His ears rang. "You're not like you are on TV." He pulled out his phone, trembling fingers typing, "Dad, you won't believe who I met today. Delete. He's the guy you hate, but delete. Mom, he helped." Tears splashed the screen. At 17, he felt 5 again, the boy hiding in a closet during his parents' shouts about debt to society and sellout systems. A bike courier in a blue vest emerged from the corner, a colleague from his delivery job. "Hey, Torres," the guy braked, wiping sweat. "Heard your old man caused a scene at the Capitol again." Jake gritted his teeth. "He's not my old man." "Sure," the courier smirked, pulling out a cigarette. "Everyone knows your mom almost died from DeSantis' laws. Good thing my dad." A punch hit his nose. The courier collapsed onto the asphalt as Jake gasped, staring at blood on his knuckles. "I've become like him, like Dad." "Bastard!" the courier roared, standing. "You and your pop's 2 of a kind." Jake fled, his backpack slamming his back, iron and shame flooding his mouth. At the governor's office, chaos reigned. Through double-paned windows, shouts filtered in, "Down with tyrants, bread, not bullets." Ron stood by a monitor live-streaming the scene, gripping the chair's armrests until his knuckles cracked. On screen, gaunt Mark Torres holding a DeSantis equal to hunger sign screamed into a camera, "His security eats steak off our taxes. And our kids. Call the police," Ron hissed. "Find dirt on this psychopath." "Sir," the press secretary hesitated. "Yes, clean. Even in jail, Everyone has skeletons." Ron slammed his fist on the table, knocking over a water glass. Ice water flooded budget papers. A knock interrupted. Casey entered with a thermos. "Knew you skipped dinner," she smiled weakly. "Madison wanted you to have this." She placed a child's drawing on the desk, a family of 5 including a dog under a rainbow. Above, "Dad, don't be angry, we love you." Ron gripped his temples. Jake's nail marks in diner wood flashed in his mind. Does his family once draw rainbows too? "Ron," Casey gently touched his hand. "You're shaking." He wanted to tell her about the diner, the boy, the receipt. Instead, he barked, "I'm busy, Casey." Her eyes widened. She left without a slam, the quieter betrayal. Jake arrived home in the rain. His cramped social housing apartment smelled of medicine and stewed cabbage. His mother coughed in the bedroom, muffled like through a pillow. "Jacob?" Her voice rasped like rusty swings. "Did you eat?" "Yeah, Mom." He froze at the door, watching her skeletal fingers clutch the blanket. The insulin pump on the nightstand blinked red, low battery. 4 more weeks until Dad's paycheck. His phone buzzed. "Dad, Jacob." Mark's voice grated like a circular saw. "Where have you been? We need hands in the protest kitchen." Tired. Tired?" Mark scoffed. "Mom's bedridden and you whine?" "At your age, too." Jake turned it off. The screen showed a saved photo, Mark hoisting him onto shoulders at the Capitol 5 years ago, both laughing. When he still believed shouting could change things. In a desk drawer lay an envelope labeled "For Mom," $80 from deliveries. Needed $240 more. He glanced at the diner receipt in his backpack. Ron DeSantis. The name of. He leapt up, overturning a chair. The man from the diner's face, his confident gestures, that strange melancholy. "No," Jake whispered, Googling furiously. The governor's photo in a suit, cold eyes. Same sharp chin, same laugh lines. "Oh God." Jake fell onto the bed, hands over his face. "I took money from the man dismantling us." Behind the wall, his mother coughed again, now ragged, ending with a thud, a dropped cup. Jake sprinted to the bedroom, dialing 911. Meanwhile, Ron stood at his office window, watching police disperse Torres's crowd. Rain drummed the glass, sirens blending with storms. In his hand, the diner receipt, found earlier in the limo, trembled. "Sir," a guard appeared. "We raided Torres's apartment. Nothing incriminating except..." He handed over a file. Photos of Jake. A school portrait with a button-sized hole in the corner, torn from a wall. Caption, "Jake Torres, 17, diagnosis anxiety disorder, on psychologist's list since 2021. Ron felt the floor drop. "All files, to the vault," he choked. "And monitor Torres family." Discreetly. As the door closed, Ron pulled his phone. He found Jake's number from the crumpled paper and typed, "Hey, it's Ron from the diner. Are you okay?" The reply came instantly. "You know who my dad is?" Rain intensified outside, blurring the city into a watercolor nightmare. The governor of Florida, a man who'd weathered 3 election campaigns and 2 assassination attempts, cried for the first time in a decade. Rain drummed on the social housing apartment's roof like a metronome counting down seconds to disaster. Jake huddled on the bathroom floor, clutching his knees to his chest. The dispatcher's voice echoed in his ears. 40-minute wait, massive accident on the highway. Through the wall, his mother's breathing rasped like tearing paper. He squeezed an empty inhaler, hollow, like their hopes. "Mom, hold on," he whispered, struggling to lift her head from the pillow. Her skin was clammy, her eyes glazed, staring at some distant void between life and death. The door burst open. Mark Torres, drenched and clutching his justice or death sign, froze at the threshold. "What?" He dropped his bag, scattering protest flyers. Lisa? God, what happened? No insulin for 3 days, Jake choked out. Mark lunged for the fridge, spilling a jar of pickles. The shelf stared empty, teeth-shaped gaps in the fog. Where's the money I sent? He seized Jake's shoulders, shaking him like a rag doll. Did you steal it? Gamble it away? Jake lurched forward, knocking over a photo frame. Glass shattered, fracturing their childhood smiles. You sent $300, Dad. His voice cracked. Insulin costs $400. Rent, electricity, food. Liar. Mark's grip tightened, his breath hot with fury. You're just like that prick DeSantis. His laws hike drug prices. His cops beat me in custody. He paid for my dinner. Jake screamed, and the room froze. A saline drip clattered to the floor. Mark recoiled, stepping back as if from a venomous snake. You took him money. From him? Each word felt like a spit. From the man destroying us? Jake felt a thread snap inside. The one that tethered him to his father. He didn't know who I was. He just helped. Just helped, Mark sneered, his laugh echoing a rusted swing in an abandoned park. That's why we're here. Because of his laws, pharmacies jack up prices. Because of his cops, I'm a marked man. Because of you, Mom's dying. Jake shoved him, sending him reeling. Your protests, your speeches, they've changed nothing. Mark raised a fist. Jake flinched, but the blow never came. Mark's hand trembled inches from his face. Get out, he hissed. Before I. Jake fled, slamming the door. A pill bottle toppled from the shelf, violet capsules scattering like confetti at a funeral. Ron DeSantis stood before a resident's bathroom mirror, fumbling with a tie. His hands trembled, constantly reaching for his phone, still glowing with Jake's message. You know who my father is? Sir, an assistant entered. Press conference in 15 minutes. Statement on Torres protests? Prepare a line about combating extremist threats. Ron splashed water on his face, trying to wash away the shadows under his eyes. But in the hallway, Casey waited. In her hand, the familiar receipt, child scrawl still visible. Found it in your jacket pocket, she said softly, like footsteps in a graveyard. Who's Jake Torres? Ron closed his eyes. Flashbacks flickered. Mark Torres in cuffs screaming, murderer. Jake etching cracks in a diner table. Madison's question, Dad, why do people fear you? He's the son of the man who hates me most, Ron exhaled. Casey stepped close, placing a hand over his heart, where the ache festered. But you helped him, because he's just a child. Ron nodded, throat tight. She hugged him, her lavender and biscuit-scented hair a shield. What do I do? He whispered, as he had decades ago, after his first courtroom loss. What this tells you, she pressed his hand to her cheek. Not the governor, you. She left him with a receipt and silence. On the receipt's reverse, beneath the child's thank you, he noticed faint numbers, a credit card digit accidentally imprinted during payment. An idea struck like lightning. Jake wandered a rain-soaked park, numb to the cold. His phone buzzed for the 8th time. Mark's name glared. He yanked the battery, hurling it into a puddle. Rage dissolved into void, post-storm emptiness. Under a flickering playground lamp stood a figure in a black coat. Jake froze. Jacob, Ron's voice cracked, uncharacteristically raw. I couldn't. You came to reclaim your kindness? Or arrest me like Dad? Jake laughed, manic and wet. Ron stepped closer, dropping his hood. Streetlight shadows deepened his face, older than official photos. I want to help, anonymously. Money, medicine. So we shut up? Jake kicked a cola can. Dad's right, you all buy silence. So your mom lives. Ron seized his shoulder, and Jake saw not a governor but a scared father. I can't change laws overnight, but I can. A siren pierced the night. Police lights erupted from the shadows. Everyone freeze. A bullhorn deafened them. Ron shielded Jake instinctively, like he'd done during a protest shooting. It's me, DeSantis, ID in hand. No action. But Jake bolted. He brought the cops. He's like all of them. A warning shot cracked behind. Jake stumbled, hands cuffed brutally. What's your name? An officer pressed him against a car hood. Jacob Torres, Ron roared, fighting guards. He's my son? The cop smirked, checking a database. Looks familiar. Jake, cheek pressed to cold metal, watched Ron struggle. A chest cam blinked red. Recording ruin. His father's Mark Torres, wanted for arson. No. Jake's plea drowned in the cuff's cold bite. Ron wrenched free, rushing forward. I vouch for him. Release him now. Sir, protocol. Do 2T. Ron's bellow drowned the rain. Jake, freed, stood shivering. Ron draped his coat over his shoulders. I'm sorry, Ron whispered. I wanted to. Don't touch me. Jake recoiled, flames in his eyes. You're all the same. You dangle hope then. He ripped off the coat, flinging it into a puddle, and ran toward the city's toxic yellow glow. At 3 a.m., Ron sat in an empty office, staring at a $20,000 transfer to Jake's card. Anonymous. Beside it lay a resignation letter, tremblingly written. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. They took Mom to ICU. Jake's voice was robotic. Needs $100,000 surgery. You bought yourself forgiveness. Congrats. Silence. Ron stared at dawn's first light on Madison's photo. Across the desk, Mark Torres' call blinked unanswered. The hospital corridor smelled of chlorine and despair. Jake sat on a cold plastic chair, staring at green floor tiles arranged in a labyrinth pattern. Overhead, a robotic voice droned, Patient Lisa Torres, operating room 3. He clutched Ron's crumpled receipt, anonymous donor, as if it were a ticket to a world where mothers didn't die from political games. A red light flickered outside the door. Jake remembered his father taking him to a planetarium. You see that star, Jacob? When it dies, it shines brightest. Now he knew it was a lie. Death didn't gleam. It hissed like an IV drip, flickered like dim monitor screens. Torres? A nurse in blue scrubs handed him paperwork. Sign the emergency surgery consent. Jake read the figure, $123,500. Numbers danced before his eyes, morphing into nights his mother starved for insulin, nights his father screamed into the phone about revolution, nights Ron's face flickered on screens, offering help. I'm 17, he whispered. Can't sign, then fetch your father. Jake swallowed a lump. He won't come. The nurse sighed, taking back the forms. Her glance said, another broken home. Mark Torres stood on the roof of a derelict warehouse, clutching a bottle of cheap whiskey. Below, streetlights glinted in puddles, the same city he both hated and loved. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Activists, journalists, debt collectors. He flipped them off. Flashback, Lisa in a wedding dress, laughing, adjusting his tie. You're my knight, Mark. Just don't lose yourself in this war. He pulled out a photo of 6-year-old Jake, taken on his first protest. On the reverse, Jake's childish handwriting, Dad's my hero. Hero, Mark snarled, hurling the bottle into the dark. Glass shattered against a fuck the system graffiti mural he'd painted a decade ago. Footsteps echoed below. Mark! Emma, his ex-activist ally, climbed the rusted stairs. Your headline news, everyone says you're on the run. What's it to you? He didn't turn. You're a sellout blogging about life after activism. Lisa needs money, you idiot. Emma seized his arm. Jacob's alone in the hospital. Are you money? Mark lunged, pressing her against the railing. You, with your White House sponsors, lecture me about money? She didn't flinch. Her eyes burned like the days they'd blockaded oil pipelines. Take this. She thrust an envelope at him. $15,000. We'll crowdsource the rest. Conditions? Mark asked. A public interview. Talk about Lisa, Jacob. How the system breaks families. Sell the story as another sob drama? Fat chance. Then die proud. Let Lisa die real. The envelope fell into a puddle. Emma left, her heels fading into the night. Mark picked up the sodden bills, realizing they equaled the amount he'd sent Jake for insulin. Ron DeSantis sat in his darkened office, striking a match. Flame lit his resignation letter, health reasons, time with family, lies he'd almost signed to stop the machine he'd built. His laptop glowed, a confidential chat labeled JT. Translation history: $20,000, $20,000, $45,000, $123,500. Latest message, JT. She'll die, like your conscience. Ron reached for a glass, filled it with water instead. Remembered Casey, you drink more since the elections. Tom, his campaign chief, burst in, tablet in hand. You seen this? He slammed it on the desk, body cam footage of Ron screaming, "Release him!" Jake in cuffs, Ron's coat dripping in a puddle. Where? Ron paled. Trending on Twitter. Tom punched the wall. The opposition brands you a terrorist accomplice. Sponsors are demanding answers. He's not a terrorist. Ron upended his chair. His mother. Not your mother. Tom ducked as if bracing for a hit. Elections are in a year, if you. Ron's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered, hearing Jake's breathless whisper. They say they won't operate without your approval. Where are you? Ron grabbed his keys. Not for you. For the cameras. Click. Ron froze, seeing Tom dialing a crisis manager. Cancel everything, Ron growled, heading out. I'm going to the hospital. Suicide mission. Tom barked. They'll devour you. But Ron didn't listen. Flashes blinded him as he entered the ward. Governor allies with Torres. Hospital scandal, journalists screamed. Security fought through the crowd. In the room, Jake stood by the window, back to the door. Lisa, pale as sheets, breathed through a machine. She's in a coma, Jake said without turning. Doctors wait for your approval. Ron approached, noticing his coat on the windowsill, washed, neatly folded. Why me? He asked. Because you're the system, Jake replied, eyes dry but hollow. And the system doesn't forgive mistakes. Ron signed the papers, scrawling his name like a death warrant. I didn't mean. I know, Jake cut in. You wanted to be a hero. Like him. Headlights flooded the window, news vans arrived. Ron flinched as Jake whispered, For the first time, thank you. But by the time he turned, Jake had vanished into the corridor shadows, as ephemeral as the stars his father once described. The video was 47 seconds long. Ron DeSantis in a wrinkled trench coat shouting, "Let him go!" Jake handcuffed, his face twisted in rage and fear. Body cam footage leaked by an anonymous account racked up 12 million views overnight. The hashtag #GovernorGomer exploded, splitting the internet into two camps, some yelling saint, others fraud. Ron sat in the kitchen of the governor's mansion, watching Casey slice an apple for Madison. The knife tapped the cutting board in rhythm with the ticking clock. Dad, is it true? Madison poked her tablet screen, frozen on Jake's face. Did you help him because he's, like me? Sasha, Ron flinched. Last night she'd overheard him tell Casey, he reminded me of her. He just needed help, Ron replied, avoiding her gaze. But his dad's bad? Madison frowned, tracing a pattern on the apple slice with a toothpick. Like in fairy tales? Casey froze, knife suspended midair. Ron saw the same look in her eyes as that night in the cafe. Don't lie. His father is misguided, Ron said carefully, choosing a word that wouldn't eat at his soul. Like I am sometimes. Madison nodded, satisfied, and ran off to watch cartoons. Casey rested a hand on Ron's shoulder. She believes you. Don't break that. Ron opened his mouth to reply, but his phone buzzed furiously. Tom, his campaign manager. Turn on the news now. Breaking news. Activist Torres' son, the governor's secret lover. Shocking details. The TV blared chaotic footage, Jake in a hospital bed, Ron signing papers, his trench coat draped over a windowsill. Photoshop screenshots of texts with heart emojis. The anchor's voice dripped with sarcasm. Insiders claim DeSantis has secretly funded the Torres family for years through offshore accounts. Maybe that explains his leniency toward radicals. Ron hurled the remote at the wall. Batteries shot out like bullets. Tell me it's not true. Casey stood in the doorway, pale. You didn't. God, no. He grabbed her hands. I just wanted to save a life. Anonymous transfers? Late-night meetings? She pulled away. Why should I believe you when the whole world sees something else? He opened his mouth but froze, catching Madison's reflection in the window. Silent in the hallway, clutching her teddy bear. "Because I love you," he whispered, "and that's the only truth that matters." Casey fled the room, slamming the door. Ron sank to the floor, back against the fridge covered in kids' drawings. One stood out, Madison's recent masterpiece, Superhero Dad with a cape like Batman's. Jake hid in the basement of an old library, where he and his dad once staged protests. His phone burned with messages. "Sell out. How much did he pay you?" Even courier friends texted, "You betrayed us for power." One number kept calling. "Dad." Jake braced himself and answered. "I didn't." "Shut up," Mark snarled through static. "You let him buy us? Have you seen what they're saying about Liza? Mom's alive," Jake shouted. "Because of him." "Alive?" Mark coughed, voice raw with fury. "She's in a coma, Jake, and her face is plastered on public murals with DeSantis horse scribbled underneath." Jake pressed into the cold wall as if it could absorb the pain. Somewhere above, a book fell, echoing through the shelves. "Dad, he didn't know he knew." Mark slammed something. "It's a game, Jake. He's using you to destroy me." "Then why aren't you here?" Jake jumped up, brushing cobwebs from the pipes. "Where's your hero act now?" Silence. Then the line cut. A new notification flashed, live video from Mark Torres. Jake tapped it with shaking hands. "Live. The truth about the governor manipulator." Mark stood before a burning trash can, face in shadow. Behind him, a banner read, "DeSantis equal to death." "I lost everything today." Mark's voice rasped like a cornered animal. "But I'll show you who this good guy really is." The camera jerked, revealing printed checks marked anonymous donor. "He paid my son, bought his silence." Mark hurled the papers into the fire. "And when the truth came out, he framed us to cover his corruption." Jake screamed into the void, but the nightmare rolled on. "Jake, if you're watching, they broke you. But I'll save you, even if I have to kill him with my bare hands." Hundreds of comments flooded in. "Burn the Capitol. Jake's a traitor." The phone slipped from Jake's fingers. He slid down the wall, cradling his head. Somewhere in the dark, a rat scratched at the floor. Ron was summoned to an emergency hearing. The Capitol's hallways buzzed like a hive. Reporters shoved mics in his face. "Did you fund Torres? Are you a pedophile? Will your wife stand by you?" He marched forward, jaw clenched as Tom murmured, "Deny everything. Say Jake blackmailed you." "No." Ron stopped at the chamber door. "I'll tell the truth." "You're committing suicide." Tom grabbed his elbow. "They'll tear you apart." Ron stepped into the blinding flash of cameras. On the podium lay the check, scrawled with, "Thank you, Mr. Ron." The room erupted. Senator Graves, his arch-rival, smirked. "Mr. DeSantis," Graves drawled, "do you admit to financing a known extremist family?" Ron picked up the mic. His voice cracked once when he spotted Madison's braid in the crowd. Casey held her hand, face unreadable. "I helped a kid," Ron said. "Not an enemy's son, not a symbol, just a person." "Liar." Graves slammed his fist. "Did you have an affair?" Ron pulled out his phone, playing a late-night recording with Jake. "She'll die, like your conscience." "That's my relationship," Ron told the chamber. "Fear, guilt, a desire to fix what our wars keep breaking." Silence, then murmurs. Graves paled. "You're manipulating." "No," Ron interrupted. "We did this. All of us." He left without waiting for a verdict. On the Capitol steps stood Jake, hood up, eye bruised. "Why did you do that?" Jake rasped. "They'll destroy you now." Ron looked at the sky, where clouds swirled like smoke from Mark's burning banner. "Because my kids are watching, and I have to show them how to fall if I want to teach them how to rise." Jake pulled out a crumpled napkin, the cafe phone number. "Then help me." His voice broke. "Teach him." They climbed into the car, unaware of the figure slipping out from behind a column, camera rolling. Ron DeSantis sat in his empty office, sorting through a stack of letters. Most were threats. Traitor, pervert, suicidal. But one, in an envelope decorated with kid stickers, made him pause. On the back, messy handwriting read, "Mr. Ron, read this first." He remembered Madison hiding notes in his briefcase. "Daddy, don't be sad," with crooked smiley faces. But this wasn't her handwriting. The envelope smelled like citrus, Jake's cologne. Inside were 3 pages, scribbled in shaky handwriting, some words smudged by tears. You asked why I didn't take Dad's card. He pawned it for Mom's medicine. When you helped me at the diner, I lied. We lived in the car for 2 weeks. Dad says it's for the greater cause, but I see Mom crying when she thinks I'm asleep. Ron leaned back in his chair as if struck. The lights of Tallahassee flickered outside, but he saw something else, Jake, tracing cracks on the diner table, his thin shoulders, the tremble in his voice. He never asked, just stayed silent. Flashback 2003. Young Ron, a rookie lawyer, stood before a judge in a worn shirt. His clients were a migrant family from Guatemala. A father, like Mark Torres, with eyes burned by desperation. They'll die if they're deported, Ron whispered to the judge. The judge laughed. Compassion won't build your career. Career. Now he sat in the governor's chair while Jake wrote, Dad used to believe in you, said you changed. But you don't know how he changed. Ron pulled the check labeled thank you off his monitor. Now he understood it wasn't gratitude. It was a cry for help. Jake stood on the roof of an abandoned school where he and his father once flew paper kites. In his hands was a box of his mother's letters. Mark wrote them every month, even when he lived at home. Liz, you're my conscience. Now those words felt like mockery. Jake struck a match and held it to the corner of an envelope, but the flame burned his fingers, and he flung the box away. Letters scattered like white doves. Coward! A voice shouted from below. Mark was climbing the fire escape, his face twisted with rage. Above them, a police drone buzzed, press hunting for headlines. Would you burn my letters too? Mark snatched a page with Lisa's handwriting. She believed in me. And you destroyed her. Jake shoved his father. You chose war over us. Mark stumbled, nearly falling off the edge. The drone hovered closer, cameras locking onto every move. They bought you, Mark hissed. He bought you like he bought the judges. Jake pulled out Ron's crumpled check, scrawled with for Lisa. This isn't from him, I stole it, he lied, so you'd finally see. Mark froze. The wind tousled his graying hair, aging him in an instant. Why? Because you're my dad, Jake sobbed for the first time in years. And I don't want to lose you even if you hate me. The drone dipped lower, broadcasting the nightmare for the evening news, father and son embracing on the edge of the abyss. But only Jake knew the knife lay in Mark's pocket. Ron sped toward the outskirts of town, where security reports said Mark was hiding. On the passenger seat sat Jake's letter and a bottle of cheap whiskey. He recalled Mark, back when they were students, speaking at a rally. Justice shouldn't be a luxury. Their paths had diverged, but the pain remained. A shack in the slums. Ron knocked, hearing a dog bark inside. Emma, one of Mark's old allies, answered, cigarette dangling from her lips. He doesn't want to see you. Give him this. Ron handed her an envelope. Inside was a personal check for $200,000 and a note for Lisa, from Jake. Think money fixes everything? Emma sneered. No, but it's a start. He walked away, leaving the envelope on the doorstep. Emma watched him go, then tore up the check, but she kept the letter. That night, Jake snuck into the hospital room. His mother lay there, tangled in wires like a spider in its web. He placed a child's drawing on her chest, himself, Mom, and Dad under a rainbow. He'll come, Jake whispered. I'll make him. His phone buzzed, a new message from Ron. Meet me where it all began. Sunrise Diner smelled of bacon and hope. Ron sat at the same booth, staring at the crack Jake once picked at. You knew? Jake stood in the doorway, face bruised. That your dad pawned the card? Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Because you'd have refused. Ron slid over a menu, like last time. Jake sat down, ordering 2 burgers. They ate in silence until Ron placed a document on the table. Emergency support program for activist families. That's my name? Jake pointed at the line. Consultant Jacob Torres. Without you, it's just paper. Ron smiled. You know the truth. Jake broke down, tears falling onto his fries. Awkwardly, Ron hugged him, realizing this was the true chain of kindness. The Capitol Hall was packed. Camera flashes, the murmur of reporters, and the hum of anticipation merged into one loud heartbeat. Ron DeSantis stood behind the podium, adjusting his tie. which had a barely noticeable coffee stain. On his lapel, a rainbow pin cut from colored paper by Madison stood out. Ready? Tom, his former campaign manager and now reluctant advisor, shoved a speech into his hand. The lawyers approved the text. Stick to the script. Ron nodded but slipped the pages into his pocket. Instead, he pulled out Jake's crumpled letter. I'm stepping down today. Tom froze, but Ron had already approached the microphones. Live broadcast. 2 p.m., every major channel. People of Florida. He hesitated, spotting Jake in the front row. The boy sat between Casey and Madison, clutching an insulin pump, the same one they once couldn't afford to refill. Today, I'm not speaking as a governor. I'm speaking as a father, as a man who made mistakes. The room fell silent. Even the skeptics closed their laptops. We've turned politics into a war where opponents aren't people, they're targets. But I met a boy who reminded me. He glanced at Madison, that behind every enemy is someone's child. The screen behind him flickered to life, showing Lisa Torres, hospital footage. She lay unconscious, with the same rainbow drawing resting on her chest. This woman fought for her life while we fought each other. Her son. Ron's voice cracked. Taught me that sometimes all it takes is seeing the person in front of you. Suddenly, the hall doors burst open. Mark Torres stepped inside, moving like he was crossing a minefield. In his hands, a box filled with Lisa's letters. Liar! Someone shouted from the crowd, but Mark raised his hand. I came. He looked at Jake. To say thank you. Ron stepped down from the podium, walking toward him. Security rushed forward, but he waved them off. I'm sorry, Mark whispered, too quietly for the microphones. I didn't know. Neither did I, Ron replied, extending his hand. The cameras clicked furiously, but before their hands met, a voice rang out, She's awake! Jake jumped up, dropping the insulin pump. The hospital footage switched to a live feed. Lisa, weak but smiling, holding the drawing. A nurse whispered into the camera. Her first words were, Where's my boy? Jake bolted for the exit, but Ron called after him. Wait! He removed the rainbow pin and fastened it to Jake's shirt. From Madison, for her. Hospital room, 2:47 p.m. Lisa stroked her son's hair, her fingers barely moving. On the hospital TV, Ron announced the launch of the Kindness Chain Initiative, a fund for families harmed by political conflicts. Mom. Jake pointed toward the door. Mark stood there, nervously holding a bouquet of daisies, Lisa's favorite flowers. I bought them with that money, he muttered, nodding toward Ron's check, which Emma had secretly returned. You were right. Pride's a terrible advisor. Lisa reached out and Mark fell to his knees beside the bed, sobbing into her hand. Jake quietly slipped out, finding Madison waiting in the hallway. Is your dad crying? She asked, holding out a teddy bear. My dad says that's okay. Yeah, Jake replied, taking the bear. Sometimes it's the only way to get stronger. Capital. 6:30 p.m. Ron packed his things in the office. On the desk lay his resignation letter and a photo taken earlier that day. Him, Jake, Madison, and Casey. Are you sure? Tom fiddled with the official seal. The program just launched. It's in good hands, Ron said, nodding toward the monitor. The live feed showed Jake handing out blankets to the homeless outside Sunrise Diner, with Mark silently unloading a truck of medical supplies beside him. Casey entered, carrying a suitcase. Madison's waiting in the car. She wants to show you her new painting, Dad as a superhero, but I'm not. To her, you are. They left, the office door swinging open behind them. A new portrait already hung in the hallway, but Ron knew his story here was finished. The real one was just beginning. Sunrise Diner, 1 year later. Jake poured coffee, wearing the same rainbow pin on his apron. At the corner window table, Mark and Lisa laughed, flipping through Madison's photo album. On the TV, the news played, the Kindness Chain program has helped 10,000 families. Ron, now a volunteer, unloaded boxes labeled, From Jake. The doorbell jingled. A little girl entered with her mother. I can't pay. Jake smiled, remembering that day long ago. Today's your lucky day. Take a seat, we've got a chain. Outside, rare Florida snowflakes drifted down. But inside, it was warm.